The shuttle had been drifting for hours, a lifeless husk against the cold alien sky. Captain Elias Kale tightened his grip on the console, staring out at the jagged terrain below. He had crash-landed on this planet almost by accident. A system misread that now threatened his survival. The engines were ruined, the communications array smashed, and every instinct told him that help would not come soon. Elias stepped out onto the rocky surface, the wind whipping at his flight suit. The planet's surface was unlike anything he had seen. Vast expanses of red-brown rock, jagged spires jutting up like frozen lightning, and the faint glimmer of distant rivers reflecting the pale light of two suns. Despite the beauty, there was a feeling in the air that made his skin crawl, as though the land itself were watching him. He surveyed the surrounding area. Trees, or something like them, were few and far between. The landscape was harsh, unwelcoming, yet he knew he needed to move. If he stayed near the shuttle, he would have no protection against whatever might lurk in the shadows of this alien world. He had no idea what lived here, but instinct told him caution was necessary. Elias remembered the small survival pack in the shuttle. He opened it carefully, checking the supplies. Rations, a few liters of water, a flare gun, and some basic tools. The tools would have to do. The rations would last him a few days, but he could not rely on that alone. He had to find shelter, and he had to find a way to signal for help. Night was approaching faster than he expected. The two suns were sinking, casting long, jagged shadows across the rocky plains. Elias knew that once darkness fell, everything would be more dangerous. He needed fire, not just for warmth but for visibility. It could help him survive the night and might even signal someone out there that he was alive. He scavenged what he could from the shuttle: metal panels, wires, anything that could be used to spark a flame. After a tense hour, he managed to build a small fire pit. Using a combination of dried fuel from the shuttle and a few volatile chemicals, he struck a match and lit a small flame. The fire flickered, illuminating his face and the surrounding rocks. The warmth was comforting, but Elias could not shake a feeling of being watched. He scanned the perimeter. Nothing moved, yet he was certain of it. Something had noticed him. Hours passed. The fire crackled, sending tiny sparks into the cold night air. Elias tried to stay calm, rationing his energy and water. But then he heard it, a faint rustling, almost imperceptible, coming from the darkness beyond the firelight. He froze, every sense alert. The sound grew louder, deliberate, like someone or something was circling him. Elias reached for his flare gun, knowing it would only scare off some creatures but might provoke others. His heart pounded. The shadows shifted, and from the darkness figures began to emerge. They moved gracefully with a silent, predatory elegance. Their bodies were lithe and muscular, covered in armor-like skins that shimmered under the firelight. They carried weapons that glinted faintly, long curved blades that seemed perfectly balanced for quick, deadly strikes, but it was their eyes that unsettled him the most. Bright, intelligent, and unflinching, watching him with an almost human awareness. Elias understood at once that these were the planet's native hunters. He had heard rumors from other explorers about species that could blend seamlessly into their environments, but nothing had prepared him for this. The hunters were not hiding anymore. The fire had drawn them out, and now there was no turning back. "Hello?" he called, trying to sound calm, though his voice trembled slightly. The hunters did not respond. They circled the fire, moving with perfect coordination, their attention fixed solely on him. Elias realized they were not immediately hostile yet. They were assessing, deciding, calculating. He remembered the survival guides, the advice for first contact. Remain calm, make no sudden movements, show respect, and do not appear weak. Elias took a slow step backward, holding his hands in view. "I mean no harm," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through his veins. One of the hunters stepped forward, tilting her head as if studying him. Unlike the others, she moved with cautious curiosity, not aggression. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and Elias felt an odd connection, a recognition of intelligence across worlds. For a tense moment, neither side moved. Then the hunter spoke, not in words he understood, but in a series of clicks and melodic tones that resonated strangely in the air. Elias did not comprehend the language, yet there was meaning in the cadence. She gestured toward the fire, then toward him, as though inviting him to stay, to share space rather than fight. Elias lowered his hand slowly. He had no choice but to trust this instinct, this strange communication. The other hunters lingered at the edges, still wary but waiting. He realized something remarkable. Despite their fearsome appearance and hunting skills, they were not immediately violent. They were intelligent, discerning, and cautious. Hours passed. The fire dwindled to embers, yet the hunters remained. Elias had learned to read their movements, a flick of a hand, a step forward, a subtle shift of weight. They were testing him, gauging his reactions. And in a strange way, he welcomed it. He had been alone for so long, drifting through space, that even this silent scrutiny was a relief. It meant life, interaction, connection. By dawn, Elias had learned more about the hunters than he could have imagined. They were guardians of this land, skilled in survival, masters of strategy, and intimately connected to their environment. They hunted not for sport, but for balance, maintaining the ecosystem of the planet with careful precision. And now he was a guest, or perhaps a curiosity, in their world. The first rays of the sun revealed more of their forms, muscles rippling under glistening skin, feathers and scales intertwined like armor, and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of generations. Elias understood something crucial. He was not just stranded. He had been chosen, observed, and tested. The planet was alive, and he was a participant in its story now. He spoke again, softer this time. "I am Elias Kale. I come from far away. I do not know how to survive here." He gestured to the shuttle wreckage. One of the hunters approached, this time closer than before. She reached out, touching the ground between them, then tapped a finger on her chest and then on him. Elias realized she was offering guidance, a way to live here, to understand, to adapt. It was not an offer of friendship in the way humans knew it, but a bridge between two species separated by vast differences. And he accepted it cautiously, aware that any misstep could mean death. The hunters began moving again, guiding him silently. They led him to a nearby canyon where water trickled and shelter could be made. Elias followed, learning to read their subtle cues. The flick of a tail, a soft click, a shift in stance. He realized survival was not just about fire or rations, but about understanding the world and its inhabitants. That night, Elias slept under the stars with the hunters keeping vigil. He was no longer alone, yet he was acutely aware of the challenge ahead. He would have to learn quickly if he hoped to survive and perhaps one day return home. The fire that had once been a beacon of desperation had become a signal of connection, a fragile bridge between a human and the hunters of an alien world. As he drifted into a cautious sleep, Elias felt a spark of hope. He had survived the night, learned the first rules of this land, and encountered beings whose intelligence and skill rivaled his own. The planet was not just hostile. It was alive, vibrant, and testing him in ways he had never imagined. And in that firelight, he understood something fundamental. Humanity's ingenuity, courage, and adaptability were his greatest tools. Above him, the twin suns rose, painting the rocky plains in gold and crimson. The hunters watched, silent but present, as Elias took his first true steps into a world that had once seemed impossible. The fire had called them, but it had also called something within him, a determination to survive, to learn, and to honor the intelligence and strength of this alien planet. The story was only beginning, but already Elias knew that his struggle would not be against the planet alone, but alongside its guardians, and for the first time since the crash, he did not feel alone. Elias woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the jagged canyon walls. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of alien flora and damp stone. The hunters were already awake, moving silently along the edges of the canyon. They watched him, not as predators watching prey, but as mentors testing a student. Elias sat up slowly, careful not to startle them, and stretched. Today would be different. Last night had been about survival, about understanding that he was not alone. Today it would be about learning to live on a planet that had rules beyond anything he had faced in human worlds. The lead hunter, the one who had first approached him by the fire, gestured for him to follow. Elias hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The hunters moved fluidly, their movements precise and deliberate like a single organism. They led him out of the canyon and across a rocky plain toward a dense forest. The forest was unlike anything Elias had seen. Trees twisted upward like coils of rope, their bark shimmering faintly, reflecting the morning light. Strange vines hung from branches, pulsing slightly as if alive. Insects the size of small birds flitted between the foliage, and distant calls echoed, haunting, musical, and unfamiliar. Elias felt a mixture of awe and fear. This world has its own rhythm, he thought. I have to move with it, not against it. The hunters stopped at the edge of a clearing. Elias noticed the ground here was worn smooth, like a path used for generations. Ahead, a structure of stone and wood rose from the ground, shaped in curves and angles that seemed both natural and deliberate. The hunters exchanged a series of clicks and chirps, and Elias understood they were instructing him to observe. He stepped closer, examining the building. It was a shelter, yes, but also a workshop and a training ground. Tools, weapons, and other objects lay organized in ways that suggested intelligence, care, and a deep understanding of their environment. Elias realized that these hunters were not simply primitive creatures. They had culture, skill, and knowledge that far surpassed many human societies. One hunter handed him a simple tool, a sharpened stone tied to a stick, and gestured for him to use it. Elias hesitated, then imitated their motions. Slowly, carefully, he carved a notch into a piece of wood. The hunter observed silently, then nodded approvingly. Elias smiled slightly. This was the first time he felt a small sense of accomplishment since the crash. Over the next several hours, Elias was taught basic survival techniques, how to find water in hidden streams, which plants could be eaten safely, how to move silently without disturbing the environment, and how to track the subtle movements of creatures that were faster, smarter, and deadlier than anything on Earth. The hunters were patient but demanding, their training rigorous. Elias's muscles ached, and his mind struggled to keep up, but he learned quickly. By midday, the hunters led him to a high ridge overlooking the plains. From this vantage point, Elias saw vast herds of creatures grazing in the distance, creatures with multiple legs, armored hides, and elegant, curved horns. Birds with metallic feathers glinted in the sunlight, and smaller predators moved stealthily through the underbrush. This planet is alive, Elias realized. Every movement, every creature is part of a balance. I cannot survive by brute force alone. I must understand, observe, and respect. The lead hunter gestured toward a distant canyon and then back to him, communicating without words. Elias understood the implication. There were dangers he had not yet faced, challenges beyond simple survival. The planet was testing him, yes, but it was also offering him a chance to prove himself, to demonstrate that humanity's cleverness could adapt even in worlds far removed from Earth. Hours passed. Elias practiced hunting with the hunters, first with simple traps, then with throwing weapons designed to immobilize rather than kill. The hunters were relentless but precise, correcting his posture, his aim, and his timing. Slowly he improved, his confidence growing with each small success. Late afternoon brought a sudden change. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, and a distant rumble echoed through the plains. Elias glanced at the hunters, who were immediately alert. Something was coming, not just a storm, but something more. Their bodies tensed, muscles rippling under their armor-like skin, eyes scanning the horizon. Suddenly, shapes emerged from the shadows of the forest. Larger than the hunters, these creatures moved with speed and aggression, their eyes glowing faintly. Elias recognized them from his scans of the planet before the crash. Apex predators, the kind that could kill quickly and without hesitation. The hunters did not panic. They spread out strategically, positioning themselves between Elias and the approaching threat. Their formation was fluid, coordinated, and terrifyingly efficient. Elias felt a surge of admiration. These creatures were not just hunters. They were guardians protecting their land and now unexpectedly protecting him. The lead hunter gestured for Elias to remain still. Heart-pounding, he obeyed, keeping low and quiet. The predators advanced, claws scraping the rocks and claws, snarls cutting through the air. The hunters engaged with swift, precise strikes, forcing the larger creatures back without endangering themselves. Elias watched, fascinated and fearful, as the hunters used both intelligence and skill to control the battlefield. When the last predator retreated into the forest, Elias exhaled slowly. He realized that despite the danger, he had been part of something extraordinary. The hunters had taught him survival, yes, but also strategy, patience, and respect for life. In this world, strength alone was not enough. Only wisdom and courage could carry one forward. That night, Elias sat by a fire with the hunters, reflecting on what he had learned. They did not speak his language, but through gestures and shared silence he felt a connection. The planet, its creatures, and these hunters were not enemies. They were teachers, and he was a student, learning the greatest lesson of all. Humanity's resilience could shine even in the harshest, most alien environments. Elias knew he would not remain stranded forever. He still had the shuttle wreckage, and eventually, he would repair his communications and return to human worlds. But he also knew that this planet, these hunters, and the lessons he had learned here would stay with him forever. Humanity's ingenuity, courage, and adaptability were not limited to Earth. They could survive, thrive, and even excel on worlds no human had yet imagined. Over the following days, Elias worked closely with the hunters. He helped gather food, build small shelters, and develop tools that combined human ingenuity with the hunter's skill. Together, they navigated the forests, plains, and rivers, facing dangers both natural and predatory. Each day, Elias grew stronger, more confident, and more aware of the delicate balance of life on this planet. One morning, as the twin suns rose over the horizon, Elias climbed to the ridge overlooking the vast landscape. The hunters stood beside him, silent but present, watching over him as they had from the beginning. He felt a surge of pride and gratitude. He had arrived as a stranded pilot, alone and vulnerable. But now he was part of something greater, a bridge between two worlds, a symbol of human determination and respect for life. The wind carried the sounds of the planet, distant calls of creatures, rustling leaves, and the soft crackle of a fire prepared by the hunters. Elias smiled, feeling a deep sense of belonging. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a participant in the life of this world, a testament to what humans could achieve when courage, intelligence, and empathy guided their actions. And as the suns climbed higher, Elias made a silent promise. He would carry the story of this planet and its hunters back to humanity, not as conquerors but as learners and allies. For the first time since the crash, he felt hope, not just for himself but for the future of humankind. Wherever the stars might take them, the hunters, their eyes gleaming with quiet understanding, seemed to recognize this promise. They had tested him, taught him, and accepted him, and in return Elias knew that he had earned their trust, respect, and perhaps in some small way friendship. The fire he had lit on that first night had called them out of hiding. It had brought danger, yes, but also opportunity, connection, and understanding. And now, standing among these guardians of an alien world, Elias Kale realized that humanity's true strength was not just in survival, but in the ability to learn, adapt, and coexist, and even on a planet far beyond the stars. The journey was far from over. The planet still held secrets, challenges, and lessons yet to be discovered. But Elias was ready. With courage, intelligence, and determination, he would face whatever came next, guided by the hunters who had shown him that even in the most alien places, humanity could rise, endure, and shine. As he gazed out over the plains, the twin suns casting long shadows across the terrain, Elias felt the first stirrings of a new purpose. He would survive. He would learn, and he would honor the bond forged between human ingenuity and the strength of this extraordinary alien world. For the first time since the crash, he felt truly alive.